Imagine walking into a classroom where everyone is supposed to feel safe and respected, only to find out that the person who should be nurturing your growth and potential is the very one tearing you down. It's a nightmare scenario that no student should ever have to face, yet for Savannah Martinez, it was her reality. On her first day at Hillside School, she wasn't just another new face trying to fit in. She was the target of blatant discrimination from none other than her teacher, Miss Miller. But what Miss Miller didn't know was that Savannah had a powerful ally, her father, the school principal. And what happened next would turn the entire school upside down. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories with unexpected twists and life-changing moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The morning began with an atmosphere thick with anticipation at Hillside School. Miss Miller, known for her strictness and inflexible stance, entered the classroom with an air of superiority, something the students were used to. However, today felt different. A new student sat discreetly in the back row, Savannah Martinez, a young black girl with a resolute gaze and a quiet determination. "Class, today we're going to discuss the Industrial Revolution," Miss Miller announced, but her voice faltered when she noticed Savannah. "You must be the new student. I hope you can keep up." The sarcastic tone and intentional pause made it clear this wasn't going to be an ordinary lesson. The class, attentive, sensed the tension brewing, like a storm about to break. Miss Miller's wary eyes scanned the students but repeatedly returned to Savannah, as if she wanted to make it clear that she wasn't welcome. Savannah felt the weight of those stares and the chill of discomfort down her spine. She knew many were expecting a reaction, but with courage, she maintained her composure. "Yes, teacher. I'm ready to learn," she replied firmly. The silence that followed was almost deafening, broken only by the murmurs of some students surprised by her direct response. Miss Miller, clearly unsettled, gave a slight sneer and turned away, resuming the lesson. But everyone's eyes were still on Savannah, sensing the beginning of something much bigger. Throughout the lesson, Miss Miller seemed to go out of her way to ignore Savannah, except when directing difficult questions at her, clearly aiming to embarrass her. "Savannah, can you explain the impact of the Industrial Revolution on workers' conditions?" The question was loaded, clearly meant to undermine her. Without hesitation, Savannah began to answer articulately, explaining in detail how working conditions deteriorated and the exhausting hours the workers faced. Her precise answer took Miss Miller by surprise, but she didn't show it. Instead, she turned to the class with a forced smile, as if trying to hide her discomfort. The students began exchanging knowing glances. Savannah's calm and confident demeanor started to disarm the teacher's attempts at intimidation. Amy, a classmate sitting near Savannah, whispered, "You handled that well. Don't let her get to you." Savannah just smiled back, but inside she felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She knew that standing up to Miss Miller wouldn't be easy. The teacher, realizing that her attempts at humiliation weren't working as expected, changed tactics. "Well, does anyone here think Savannah really understood the concept?" The insinuation hung in the air, making her intention to discredit Savannah clear to everyone. During the break, Savannah went outside to the courtyard, trying to process what had happened. She sat alone in a corner while curious and some sympathetic eyes watched her from afar. "I can't believe what she did. This is unacceptable," Jake muttered to a group of friends. The outrage began to spread among the students, many of whom felt that something needed to be done. Savannah, meanwhile, was reflecting on how to handle it. "I can't let her continue like this, but I can't react impulsively either," she thought. The sense of resilience and perseverance grew within her, even though she didn't yet know how to respond. When she returned to the classroom, Miss Miller was ready with another prepared question. "Savannah, could you tell us the main technological innovations of the Industrial Revolution and how they impacted economic growth?" Again, The intention was clear: to intimidate. But Savannah, head held high, answered precisely, discussing the steam engine and the mechanization of factories. The impact of her words echoed throughout the room. The teacher, visibly upset, gave her a disdainful look and turned away. Her classmates, once silent, now began to see Savannah differently, as someone who, despite the challenges, didn't back down. Gradually, the situation began to change. Students who had previously only observed now felt inspired by Savannah's strength. However, the atmosphere in the classroom was still tense. Miss Miller, with a forced smile, said, "Well, it seems you've studied a lot. Let's see if you can keep this up." It was a clear attempt to unsettle her, but Savannah, with a determined look, just nodded. The confrontation, silent yet constant, continued. "She's not going to stop, and neither will I," Savannah thought, feeling her faith in her own strength grow. She knew she needed more than courage to face this situation. She needed support. By the end of the day, Savannah decided it was time to talk to her father. When she got home, she told him everything that had happened. "Dad, I know I can handle this, but you need to know what's going on. She's provoking me in front of the whole class, and this can't go on," she said, her voice firm, but with an undertone of emotion she couldn't hide. Mr. Martinez, the school principal, listened intently. He felt the anger rising, but knew he needed to act carefully. "Sweetheart, I know you're strong, but no one deserves to go through this. Tomorrow, I'm going to take care of this." He hugged her, conveying all the love and compassion he felt. A revelation was coming. The next day, Mr. Martinez entered the school with a determined look. He walked down the hallway with firm steps, and everyone who crossed his path felt the intensity of his presence. When he entered the classroom, Miss Miller tried to disguise her surprise but couldn't hide her nervousness. "Good morning, Miss Miller. Can we talk?" he said, his voice firm but controlled. Savannah, sitting at her desk, felt her heart race. Something was about to change, and she knew this was a crucial moment. The entire class was silent, every student attentive, waiting for what would come next. "Miss Miller, I've heard you've had some difficulties dealing with a new student," he began, his tone calm but laden with meaning. The teacher tried to argue, but Mr. Martinez interrupted her with a gesture. "I'm not here to argue, but to ensure that all students have a safe and respectful environment to learn. And what happened yesterday does not reflect that." The silence in the room was palpable, each word echoing like a resounding blow. The students looked from Savannah to Miss Miller, awaiting the teacher's response, who now seemed unable to find the right words. And it was at that moment that the real turning point began to take shape. Mr. Martinez looked at each student in the room before concluding, "No kind of prejudice will be tolerated here. I hope everyone understands that." Miss Miller, visibly uncomfortable, tried to argue, but her words rang hollow. Savannah, for her part, felt a deep relief. There was still much to be done, but this was a significant step. The atmosphere in the classroom changed, and a new sense of hope began to emerge. Something was shifting, and that change, sparked by Savannah's courage, would have a lasting impact. The following morning, the atmosphere in the school was thick with anticipation. The news of what had transpired in Miss Miller's class had spread like wildfire, and the tension was palpable. As Principal Martinez walked down the hallway, the murmurs of students and teachers alike echoed around him. His steps were purposeful, each one carrying the weight of a decision that would not only affect his daughter but the entire school community. "Good morning, Mr. Martinez," greeted Mrs. Collins, the secretary, with a worried expression. He nodded briefly, his mind focused on what lay ahead. He knew that his role as a father and principal would intersect in ways that demanded both courage and fairness. Entering the classroom, he felt the eyes of every student on him. The usual chatter ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Savannah, sitting quietly, looked at her father with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Miss Miller stood at the front, her posture rigid, a forced smile on her lips. "Principal Martinez, what brings you to my classroom today?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned politeness. Mr. Martinez took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Miss Miller, we need to have a conversation about what happened yesterday," he began, his tone measured but firm. The students, their eyes wide with anticipation, sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Miss Miller's smile faltered slightly, and she crossed her arms defensively. "I assure you, Mr. Martinez, I run a disciplined classroom. If there were any misunderstandings, I'm sure they were unintentional," she replied, her voice tinged with annoyance. Mr. Martinez maintained his composure, his gaze steady. "It's not about discipline, Miss Miller. It's about respect and equality. I've heard from multiple sources that Savannah was singled out in a way that was not only inappropriate but discriminatory." The words hung in the air, causing a stir among the students. Some exchanged glances, while others focused intently on the unfolding scene. It was clear that this conversation was about more than just an isolated incident. "I would never discriminate against any student, Principal Martinez." "Perhaps your daughter is feeling sensitive because she's new," Miss Miller retorted, her tone defensive and dismissive. Savannah's cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment, but she remained silent, her hands clenched under the desk. Mr. Martinez, feeling the surge of emotion but keeping it in check, continued. "Miss Miller, this isn't about sensitivity. It's about ensuring that every student feels safe and valued in this school. Discrimination, in any form, is unacceptable." His voice was calm, but there was an underlying intensity that made it clear he wouldn't back down. The class watched, captivated by the unfolding drama. Miss Miller, visibly flustered, glanced around the room, her eyes settling briefly on Savannah before looking back at Mr. Martinez. "I believe this is being blown out of proportion. I was simply doing my job, teaching my class. If Savannah felt uncomfortable, that was not my intention," she said, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. Mr. Martinez stepped closer, his presence imposing but not intimidating. "Intention doesn't negate impact, Miss Miller. Your words and actions have consequences, and it's my responsibility to ensure that those consequences don't harm our students." His words resonated through the room, a powerful reminder of the responsibility educators hold. There was a heavy silence, broken only by the shuffling of feet and the occasional murmur. The students, who had initially been quiet spectators, now felt a growing sense of involvement. Some nodded in agreement with Mr. Martinez, while others whispered amongst themselves. "He's right. She was totally unfair yesterday," one student muttered. Another added, "It's about time someone stood up to her." Savannah, her heart pounding, felt a swell of pride and relief. Her father was standing up not just for her, but for everyone who had ever felt marginalized or mistreated. The sense of hope and possibility began to take root in the classroom. Miss Miller, however, was not ready to concede. "I'm not sure what you expect me to do, Mr. Martinez. I treat all my students equally," she insisted, though her voice wavered slightly. Mr. Martinez, his gaze unwavering, replied, "I expect you to reflect on your actions and understand the impact they have. This isn't about punishing you. It's about ensuring that this school is a place where every student, regardless of their background, can learn and grow without fear of being singled out or disrespected." The firmness in his voice left no room for argument. It was clear that this was not just a reprimand, but a call for change. A few students began to clap, their applause tentative at first but growing in strength. It was a gesture of support for both Savannah and Mr. Martinez, a small but significant act of solidarity. Miss Miller, taken aback, looked around in disbelief. "You're siding with her?" she asked, her voice incredulous. One student, a usually quiet girl named Emily, stood up. "We're not taking sides, Miss Miller. We just want to be treated fairly. What happened yesterday wasn't right." Her voice, though soft, carried a conviction that resonated with the rest of the class. More students began to voice their agreement, their support for Savannah and the stand her father was taking. Mr. Martinez, moved by the students' response, nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Emily. It's important that we all feel empowered to speak up when we see something wrong. This is how we create a community that values each other." He turned back to Miss Miller, his expression gentle but resolute. "Miss Miller, I believe you care about your students. But caring means being willing to learn and grow, just as we expect our students to do." His words were both a challenge and an invitation, a way to transform a moment of conflict into an opportunity for growth and understanding. Miss Miller, her shoulders slumped, seemed to deflate. I see your point, Mr. Martinez. I didn't mean to cause harm. Perhaps I let my frustrations get the better of me." There was a sincerity in her voice now, a recognition that perhaps she had crossed a line she hadn't been fully aware of. Mr. Martinez gave a slight nod. "That's all I'm asking, Miss Miller. For reflection and change. We all make mistakes, but what matters is how we choose to move forward." His words, spoken with a quiet authority, seemed to hang in the air like a promise. The students watched, their respect for both Savannah and her father growing with each passing moment. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the class, Mr. Martinez looked around at the students, his eyes lingering on Savannah. "Remember, you all have the power to make a difference. Stand up for what's right, and support each other. That's how we build a better school and a better world." The students began to gather their things, but the atmosphere was different now, lighter, more hopeful. Savannah stood up and walked to her father, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, hugging him tightly. He smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "No, Savannah. Thank you for your courage. You're the one who made this happen." The students filed out of the room, some stopping to offer Savannah a word of support or a pat on the back. Miss Miller remained at her desk, deep in thought, as if re-examining everything that had transpired. Mr. Martinez approached her once more. "Miss Miller, I hope we can work together to create the kind of school we all want. One where everyone feels valued." She nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I'll do my best, Mr. Martinez. For all of them." As he left the room, Savannah at his side, Mr. Martinez felt a sense of satisfaction mixed with hope. This was just the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. The air was thick with tension as the students filled the classroom the next day. Whispers fluttered through the room like restless birds, everyone speculating about what would happen next. Miss Miller stood at her desk, her face a mask of determination mixed with unease. Savannah sat quietly in the back, her heart beating fast, but her gaze steady. It was as if the entire class was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. Then, the door swung open, and Principal Martinez walked in, his presence commanding immediate silence. "Good morning, everyone. Miss Miller, may I have a word?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The class knew this wasn't just a request, it was the start of a pivotal moment. Miss Miller's expression tightened, and she nodded reluctantly. "Of course, Mr. Martinez. What can I do for you?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. Mr. Martinez didn't waste any time. "I've reviewed the situation that occurred in your class. It's clear that certain behaviors and remarks were inappropriate and unacceptable. His words were direct, and the impact was immediate. The students exchanged looks of shock and curiosity. They had never seen their principal address a teacher this way, especially not in front of a class. It was a confrontation that felt both necessary and overdue, a reckoning for actions that had long gone unchecked. Savannah felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Relief that her father was taking a stand, but also anxiety about what might happen next. "Miss Miller, this school has zero tolerance for discrimination in any form," Mr. Martinez continued, his gaze unwavering. "Your treatment of Savannah was not only unprofessional but also harmful. We are educators, role models. We must be better." There was a collective intake of breath from the students. Some leaned forward, captivated by the scene unfolding before them. Miss Miller's face turned a shade paler, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk as if searching for stability. I was trying to maintain discipline, to challenge her as I would any other student," Miss Miller stammered, but there was no confidence behind her words. Mr. Martinez shook his head slowly. "Challenge is one thing, Miss Miller. Singling out and demeaning a student is another. We have a duty to uplift and support, not tear down." His voice, though measured, carried an intensity that made it clear he was speaking not just as a principal but as a father deeply affected by what had happened. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. Each word hung in the air, heavy with meaning and consequence. The class watched, spellbound, as Mr. Martinez continued. "You will be placed on administrative leave while we investigate this matter further. In the meantime, another teacher will take over your classes." There it was, a decision that sent shockwaves through the room. Gasps and murmurs erupted among the students. This was unprecedented, a clear signal that the school would no longer tolerate behavior like Miss Miller's. Savannah felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. She had wanted accountability, but seeing her teacher's face crumple in shock and shame was difficult, even after all she had endured. Miss Miller opened her mouth as if to protest, but no words came out. Instead, she nodded slowly, her expression a mix of disbelief and resignation. "I understand, Mr. Martinez," she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no defiance now, only the hollow acceptance of someone who knew they had crossed a line. Mr. Martinez nodded. "Thank you, Miss Miller. I hope you take this time to reflect on what it means to be an educator, to understand the power and responsibility we hold." His words were not just for her, but for everyone listening. The students absorbed the message, the weight of his words sinking in. Savannah, sitting quietly in the back, felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her father had not only stood up for her, but had also made it clear that such behavior would not be tolerated. But she also felt a pang of compassion for Miss Miller, who now seemed more like a flawed human being than the antagonist she had once appeared to be. "I never wanted this," she thought, her heart heavy. She knew that while the confrontation was necessary, the resolution would be more complex, more layered than a simple victory or defeat. It was a lesson in the nuances of justice, one that she and her classmates would carry forward. The rest of the class passed in a blur. A substitute teacher was brought in, and the lesson proceeded as scheduled, but the atmosphere was charged with the aftermath of what had transpired. During lunch, students gathered in small groups, discussing what they had witnessed. "Did you see the look on her face? I can't believe Mr. Martinez actually suspended her," one student exclaimed, a mixture of shock and admiration in their voice. "Yeah, but it was the right thing to do," another added. "She was way out of line." The conversations buzzed with the realization that the school was changing, that old norms of behavior were being challenged and redefined. Savannah found herself surrounded by supportive classmates, many of whom she had barely spoken to before. "You were so brave, Savannah. We're all proud of you," said Amy, giving her a tight hug. Savannah smiled, though her mind was still processing everything that had happened. "Thanks, Amy. I couldn't let it go on like that," she replied, her voice steady but reflective. The support felt good, reassuring even, but she knew that this was just the beginning. Real change would take time, and she was ready to be a part of that change, no matter how challenging it might be. Mr. Martinez spent the rest of the day handling the administrative fallout from the morning's events. He received calls from concerned parents, supportive colleagues, and even a few disgruntled voices questioning his decision. Each conversation required patience and clarity, reinforcing the school's commitment to a safe and inclusive environment. By the end of the day, he was exhausted but resolute. His decision had set a precedent, one that would hopefully pave the way for a more compassionate and equitable school culture. "It's not going to be easy," he thought, "but it's necessary." He knew that leadership often meant making tough, unpopular choices. When he finally returned home that evening, he found Savannah waiting for him in the living room. "Hey, Dad," she greeted, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Hey, sweetheart," he replied, pulling her into a hug. "How are you feeling?" Savannah hesitated, then said, "Relieved, I guess. But also, I don't know. I didn't want to get her fired. I just wanted her to stop." Mr. Martinez nodded, understanding her conflicted feelings. "You did the right thing, Savannah. It's not about getting someone fired. It's about standing up for what's right. And sometimes, that means people have to face the consequences of their actions." He paused, then added, "But it also means giving people a chance to learn and grow." Savannah sighed, leaning into her father's comforting presence. "I know, Dad. I just hope things get better from here." Mr. Martinez smiled gently. "They will, sweetheart. You've already made a difference. And now, we have to keep moving forward, one step at a time." As they sat together, the weight of the day began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and purpose. This was just one chapter in a much larger story, one that was far from over. The resolution of today's events was not the end, but a new beginning, a promise of change and the courage to see it through. The events of the past week had left a deep impression on everyone at Hillside School. The confrontation between Mr. Martinez and Miss Miller had become a catalyst for change, sparking discussions not only in classrooms but also in hallways, staff meetings, and even at the dinner tables of students' homes. There was a sense that the old ways of doing things were being questioned and reevaluated. In response, the school administration decided it was time to take action. "We need to make sure this never happens again," Mr. Martinez declared at a faculty meeting. His words were met with nods of agreement. It was time for Hillside to become a beacon of inclusivity and respect. A committee was formed to review the school's policies and practices, ensuring they promoted a culture of equality and fairness. Teachers, parents, and students were invited to participate, giving everyone a voice in shaping the future of their school. Savannah, still processing the whirlwind of recent events, was asked to join as a student representative. "Are you sure you want me?" she asked, surprised. Mr. Martinez smiled. "Absolutely, Savannah. Your courage started this conversation. We need your perspective." It was a daunting responsibility, but she agreed, feeling both honored and nervous. This was more than just about her. It was about making a lasting impact. The first meeting was a mix of emotions. Teachers like Mrs. Thompson, who had always supported Savannah, spoke passionately about the need for change. "We can't just pay lip service to these ideas," she said. "We need real, actionable steps." Parents shared stories of their own children's struggles with discrimination, and students, emboldened by recent events, spoke up about their experiences. "I've been here for 3 years, and I've seen things that made me feel like I didn't belong," one student confessed, her voice trembling but resolute. Savannah listened, her heart heavy but hopeful. It was clear that her story was just one of many. As the meeting progressed, ideas began to take shape. The committee proposed new training programs for teachers, focusing on cultural sensitivity and unconscious bias. It's not enough to say we're against discrimination. We have to be proactive, Mr. Martinez emphasized. There was talk of revising the curriculum to include more diverse perspectives, ensuring that every student saw themselves represented in what they were learning. History isn't just one story, Savannah said during one discussion. It's many stories, and we need to tell them all. Her words resonated with everyone in the room, sparking a wave of agreement and determination. Outside of the committee meetings, the impact of these discussions was already being felt. Teachers who had once been silent or indifferent were now actively engaging with their students, seeking to understand their experiences and perspectives. Mrs. Thompson began each of her classes with a simple question: "How can I make this space better for you?" The responses were eye-opening. "Let's talk about more than just the textbook," one student suggested. "Can we discuss what's happening in the world right now?" Another added, "It would be great if we could have more projects where we can explore our own cultures." The shift in dialogue was palpable, a sign that change was taking root. Savannah, though still adjusting to her new role, felt a growing sense of pride and purpose. She saw how her actions had inspired others to speak up and take part in the transformation of their school. One day, as she walked through the halls, a younger student approached her hesitantly. "Are you Savannah?" the girl asked, her voice timid but filled with admiration. "Yes, that's me," Savannah replied, smiling warmly. The girl hesitated, then said, "I just wanted to say thank you. My brother is in your class, and he told me what you did. It means a lot." Savannah's heart swelled with emotion. It was moments like these that reminded her why this fight was so important. The changes at Hillside didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks and resistance, especially from those who felt uncomfortable with the new direction. Some teachers grumbled about the extra training sessions, and a few parents voiced concerns about the revised curriculum. But for every complaint, there were voices of support and encouragement. "This is about more than just our school," Mr. Martinez reminded everyone at another meeting. "We're setting an example for how to create a community where everyone feels valued." His words served as a rallying cry, motivating the committee to push forward despite the challenges. One of the most significant reforms was the introduction of a new student-led organization called Voices of Hillside. The group was designed to give students a platform to discuss their concerns and propose solutions to issues they faced. Savannah was asked to be one of the founding members. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," she confessed to Mr. Martinez one afternoon. "I'm still figuring things out myself." He looked at her with a fatherly smile. "That's exactly why you're perfect for it, Savannah. You're not afraid to speak up, and that's what this group needs." His encouragement gave her the confidence to take on the role. The first Voices of Hillside meeting was a powerful experience. Students from all grades gathered in the school auditorium, sharing their stories and discussing ways to improve their community. "I always felt like my opinions didn't matter," said one sophomore. "But being here, seeing all of you, I feel like things can change." Another student added, "I want to make sure no one else feels alone or unheard." The energy in the room was electric, filled with the promise of a new beginning. Savannah, listening to her peers, felt an overwhelming sense of hope and responsibility. This was more than she had ever imagined when she first stepped into that classroom. The transformation at Hillside School continued to unfold over the next few months. The curriculum changes were implemented, and teachers embraced the new training programs. The school even organized a series of events celebrating cultural diversity, including a Heritage Day, where students could share their backgrounds and traditions. The event was a huge success, with students and families coming together to learn from one another. Savannah, dressed in a traditional outfit representing her heritage, felt a sense of pride and belonging she had never experienced before. It was a day that encapsulated the spirit of the new Hillside. As the school year drew to a close, the impact of the reforms was undeniable. The atmosphere at Hillside was different, more open, more supportive. Students who had once felt isolated now found themselves part of a thriving community. Teachers, too, felt the change, their classrooms transformed into spaces of mutual respect and learning. Savannah, reflecting on everything that had happened, knew that this was just the beginning. "There's still so much work to do," she told Mr. Martinez one day. He nodded, a proud smile on his face. "There always is, Savannah. But look at what you've already accomplished. This school is a better place because of you." As the final bell rang on the last day of school, students flooded the halls, their laughter and chatter filling the building. Savannah watched them, her heart full. She had started this journey feeling alone and unsure, but now she was part of something much bigger. "You did it," Amy said, coming up beside her. "We did it," Savannah corrected, smiling. "And we're just getting started." The two friends walked out of the school together, the sun shining brightly overhead. It was a perfect symbol of the new day dawning at Hillside, a day filled with hope, courage, and the promise of continued growth and understanding. The reforms at Hillside had set a new standard, not just for the school but for the entire community. Other schools in the district began reaching out, curious about the changes and eager to learn from Hillside's experience. "Can you believe it?" Savannah said to Mr. Martinez one day. "Our little school is inspiring others." He laughed warmly. "That's what happens when people stand up for what's right. Change has a way of spreading." Savannah knew that this was true, and it made her feel both humbled and empowered. She had found her voice, and now she was using it to help others find theirs. As summer approached, Savannah took some time to reflect on everything she had experienced. She thought about the fear and uncertainty she had felt at the beginning, the anger and sadness, but also the pride and joy that had come with standing up for herself and others. "It's amazing what can happen when you refuse to stay silent," she mused. Her journey had been one of transformation, not just for herself but for her entire school. And as she looked ahead, she felt ready for whatever came next, knowing that she had the strength and the support to face any challenge. Hillside was no longer just a place of learning, it was a community, one that she was proud to be a part of. Now that you've heard this inspiring story, it's time to think about how you can apply this knowledge to your own life. How many times have you witnessed someone being treated unfairly and felt unsure about what to do? Maybe you thought it wasn't your place to get involved, or maybe you felt powerless to make a difference. But the truth is, just like Savannah, you have more strength than you realize. Ask yourself, what would you do if you were Mr. Martinez? Would you have the courage to stand up to someone in a position of authority to defend what's right? And if you were Savannah, would you have the determination to endure humiliation and still hold your head high? Each of us has the power to be a positive force in the world, but it requires action. So, what can you do starting today? Maybe it's supporting a friend who's going through a tough time, talking to a teacher or leader about something that doesn't seem fair, or simply offering a kind word to someone who needs it. Small acts of kindness can make a big difference, and that's how we begin to create a wave of change. Because when we come together for a common goal, we can overcome any obstacle. Why not start right now? And don't forget, the knowledge you gain today is just the beginning. Every story you hear, every example of courage and resilience, is an opportunity for you to grow and inspire those around you. If you believe in the power of transformation and want to keep learning how to become a person who makes a difference, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way, You won't miss any content and will keep getting more stories that inspire you to be the best version of yourself. Let's build a more just, more compassionate world together, one step at a time.